With this new sort of shift in the paradigm and the shift to work from home and the social distancing that's been imposed at both national and state level right now, strong recommendations, but going forward, maybe looking at even lockdown. So, this has really, like I said, changed the way that we're working, right? And pushing users to stay at home and get work done that way. So we're going to sort of look at the risks grouped into three categories here. So there's people, process, and technology, right? So within the people, right, now users are at home, they're more distracted, they're more, they're not in their usual environment, right? They're outside their element, not their usual working environment. So that, coupled with the fact that unfortunately criminals are taking advantage of this, of the panic and sort of the paranoia around this there's been a huge spike in an increase in phishing emails, right? So criminals are taking advantage of this and sending out links, things like, go and read here's a link to the recommendations for your state for what to do about COVID-19, or here's a PDF with a new vaccine that's been developed. Open this PDF and look at what's inside here, right? These attackers are generally trying to get you to take some action, right? These are, like I said, generally will fall into either clicking links or and that link will take you to a website that's compromised, and it will try to exploit your browser to gain local access to your machine. Or it could be opening files, right? And then that will take advantage, if it's Adobe, if it's a PDF, maybe taking advantage of a vulnerability in Adobe, or a Word document, taking advantage of the Word platform. Or the last one that we often see is entering credentials, right? So this could be things like, hey, come here and sign up for, and come here and enter your password. Your Google account's been compromised, go in here and enter your Google account credentials, right? Aiming to steal credentials. So looking at the people arena and what you can do to sort of mitigate some of this risk, right? The big one is user education. So there's lots of good training platforms out there. And what they do is they'll provide, whatever you're comfortable with, monthly, quarterly, annual training. These are not super, this is not an hour-long seminar, right? These are generally pretty quick and easy. So we recommend, doing them at least quarterly or maybe even monthly trainings, just a couple minutes, just so it's constantly sort of top of mind for your user base. So these educations are going to provide them with information and a way to fight against these types of attacks, right? So what are things that I should be looking for? What sort of suspicious actions may I see in emails? So in addition to user education, the sort of other side of that coin is then testing those users on what they've learned. So this is phishing campaigns, right? And again, lots of great platforms out there. And what these do is they'll, again, monthly, quarterly, whatever you're comfortable with, send out an email that will use the same tools, tactics, and techniques of attackers so that you can identify who in your organization is posing risk, right? And if there are users that are repeatedly clicking on the links in the simulated attacks or repeatedly opening files, then you can spend some one-on-one time addressing those risks. But it's without doing these types of things, you have no way of knowing who in your risk is needing help and who might pose the most risk. So that's the people, right? And then looking at process, again, whereas before, if you needed something from a coworker, you would just go over to their desk and ask for it, right? Maybe the CFO wants to, some payroll to get paid, or needs a vendor to get paid. He's going to go and talk to the accountant and say, here, here's the information. Please go ahead and process this payment. You can't do that anymore, right? So now we're seeing requests that generally would have been face-to-face are now coming across in email or Slack or Teams, whatever your communication method is now. So, it's important to put process in place around these sort of things, right? And this is going to be different for each different business, right? If your organization is only doing maybe one of these payments, and the payments is just one example, but if your organization is only doing one of these payments a day, well, then make every single payment that goes out require a phone call, right? Say, okay, you can email, but then you also have to follow it up with a phone call to say, hey, this is valid, right? Or if the person that receives it, they have to call you to make sure that it is valid. And if your organization is doing thousands of these a day, well, maybe the threshold is $1,000, right? It's a conversation. It's something you have to discuss as a business, but, come together, work on, what processes can be put in place to reduce the risk of somebody making a mistake or somebody falling for one of these phishing attacks. And then technology-wise, right, there's a couple options. Some of the really most effective and cheapest ones are email protection, right? So if you already are using, generally people use Office 365 or the Exchange in Office 365. And the E3 and E5 licenses come built in with some measure of phishing protection and spam protection, right? So going in and you're something you're likely already paying for, and if you go in there and configure that stuff properly, you can dramatically reduce the amount of phishing emails you're getting. Another really easy one, and this one is actually free, is something called SPF and DMARC. So these are methodologies built-in functionality within DNS, your domain name system. And what they do is they configure who is allowed to send and receive as you. So when you get an email and it says, oh, it's from the CEO and it's the he's asking me to buy gift cards or whatever the case is, the SPF and DMARC records will help to cut down on the amount of that, where you're seeing, oh, well, it says it's from my CFO and it looks legitimate, but it actually came from somebody outside of the organization posing as my CFO. So like I said, SPF and DMARC, those are totally free. You can Google those. If you have questions about any of the things we've talked about or any of these technologies or what TBC's specific approach is to solving these problems, of course, we're happy to answer those and reach out to us. But those are the three.